Hey, it's Liv and welcome back to my channel Endless Pages. Welcome to today's video, which is my reading wrap up for the month of April. So I'm really happy with what I read in April. I read 8 books and a picture book. So really successful for me. I read a lot of great books, some not so great books. But overall I feel like majority of the books I really loved. So without further ado, let's just jump into it. The first book I read in April was As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson, the third and final book in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder trilogy. This is one of my favourite trilogies ever now. It's made me really want to read more thrillers. Basically the plot is this girl and there's been a whole bunch of kind of crime in her small town, and in the first book she investigates this murder of this young girl called Andy Bell, who was allegedly killed by her boyfriend Sal, who then took his own life, and for her kind of final project for high school she reinvestigates the case. And it's kind of mixed media. There's a podcast transcript and interviews transcripts, and I love anything mixed media in my books. So this is the final book to that story. And what I liked about this book was what made it different from the previous 2 books in the series, because I was a little nervous to read this because I was like, what is going to set this apart from the other books? Because the first 2 books are very similar, I would say, in plot. Even though it's kind of 2 different cases, the kind of structure and story is different. So I was like, obviously, because of the end of the previous book, they're going to need to do something different. Otherwise, it's going to be 3 of the same kind of structure. But they didn't do that. It was still a fun, fast-paced kind of investigation, but the stakes were higher. And I would say the tone was a little bit darker, which I liked. I liked that it got darker towards the end, and I liked that you got to see the kind of implications. The main character is Pip, if I didn't say that before. Pip is our main character, and she has basically been involved into murder investigations and interviewed and gotten really involved with some really bad people and put herself in harm's way to get to the truth time and time again. So in this book we kind of see the repercussions of that, and I'm glad that there was consequences for her actions, otherwise it might be a little bit unrealistic with how much, you know, crime and murder she's been involved with. And I like that we got to see her dealing with her mental health a bit more, and the implications on her mental health, the previous 2 books and the horrible, really messed up stuff she's been involved in. And obviously that's not going to leave a person the same that they started out as. So I like to see her exploring that. And yeah, I loved the very different motivations for this storyline. And I liked the darker tone. I liked the higher stakes. I thought it was a great way to end this series, to really set it apart from the previous 2 books and kind of go out with a bang. And the ending was super cute as well. That made me like smile on my face. So yeah, there's not much more I can say about this book without spoiling, but I rated it 5 stars. So I've now rated the whole trilogy 5 stars. Every book in this series is fast paced. This is just as fast paced as the previous 2 books. A little darker though, which I like. I like me something a little bit darker, especially for a YA book. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this book and it was a great start to the reading month. Second book I read in April was Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. So this book was not at all what I was expecting it to be. So basically the plot is we have our main character, whose name I can't remember, Ryland, and he wakes up in space. He's woken up out of a coma. He has like none of his memories, and he realizes he is on this mission to save Earth, and he is the Earth's last chance at survival. So he kind of has to race the clock to save Earth. So I don't know why I had expectations going into this book that it was like a fun like space adventure, like fast paced. It was literally just a scientist figuring out the science of what was happening to cause his kind of planet to die and how to save Earth. And I really liked the main character. He was really funny and relatable, and his motivations were pure, and he was just a really fun person to read from. I liked the plot of him slowly getting his memory back and slowly having to piece things together about his life and who he is. And then there was like a twist halfway through which totally caught me by surprise, and I loved, and it was super interesting. We get introduced to, let me just say, a super interesting character, and that dynamic of Ryland and that character, without spoiling, was amazing and interesting, and I loved it, and it was funny and unlike anything I've ever read before, and it was so heartfelt and beautiful. I like really enjoyed the writing. There is a lot of scientific talk and talking about like algorithms and working out the science behind stuff, which at first I was like, this is going to be confusing, but they just give you enough information that even a dum-dum like me can follow along kind of the science of what's going on. This book is an absolutely fantastic science fiction book. If you're a science fiction nerd and haven't read this, like, you need to read it. You're going to absolutely love it. And it was laugh out loud funny. I remember I watched The Martian, which Andy Weir also wrote. I haven't read the book, but I watched the movie, and that movie was really funny. And you definitely can see that he likes to put humour in all of his stuff, because I was laughing out loud with this book. And it was, yeah, it was really heartwarming and fun. Still quite fast paced as well. Not as fast paced as I was expecting it to be, but it still moved at a quick pace. And it moved at the correct pace from what was going on plot-wise as well. So I rated this 5 stars. It was fun. I had a really fun time reading this. It was unlike anything I've read before. And yeah, I'm obsessed. Next up, I read Blackout. This is by a bunch of authors. We've got Angie Thomas, Nicola Yoon, Ashley Woodfolk, Nick Stone, Tiffany D. Jackson and Donielle Clayton. This is a collection of short love stories. It's set in New York, and there's a heat wave. New York? Yeah, there's a heat wave and it causes a blackout because everything's just overheated, and it's a bunch of different stories that take place during the blackout, mainly focusing on people of colour. I don't normally read contemporary romances, like, ever. I'd say it's one of my least favourite genres, but I'm glad I picked this up. I don't know how I found out about it. I remember being at Dimmicks and seeing it, and I was like, I know that title, so I picked it up. I'm really, really glad I did though, like, definitely worth the pick up. So yeah, this is like, I can't remember how many stories, like 4 or 5 like short stories that take place across different parts of New York. Oh, I almost dropped the book. And some of the stories that I do appreciate have little connecting characters and stuff. I really appreciate how they make all the little connections. I rated this book 4 stars. I enjoyed the majority of the stories. There was only 2 stories that I didn't enjoy as much. The stories I didn't enjoy as much was The Long Walk by Tiffany D. Jackson. That one I just didn't find really cute, and I didn't connect with the characters as much. And then there was another one I didn't like as much. Oh god, I'm so sorry. One sec. Yeah, All the Great Love Stories and Dust. That was the other one I didn't like. I would rate those 2 3 star, but I would rate the rest of the stories 4 star. I thought, yeah, I had a massive smile on my face when I was reading these stories. I thought they were super, super cute and wholesome. And yeah, this book is mainly just about the discussions that our characters have. I also loved the story No Sleep Till Brooklyn. That was a standout story in this for me. I would rate that one 5 stars and all the rest 4. Just because it was more of a discussion about having your own identity outside of a relationship and being happy with your identity and who you are. That was a standout story for me. I thought that was bloody adorable and I loved the message. Yeah, I read this in one sitting. It was super quick and easy, wholesome, and yeah, it's just like a heartwarming, feel-good book. I rated Blackout 4 stars. Then I read The Grace Year by Kim Liet. Okay, this book is a fantastic example of a feminist book that is show me, don't tell me. I know a lot of books are like, this is a feminist book, and then just say it's feminist, but this book is so feminist. It's a great example of showing me, not telling me. I was obsessed with this book. I still am. This book is fantastic. We follow a main character called Tyranny, and Tyranny lives in this village, this really isolated village, where this event called the Grace Year happens. And the Grace Year is every year when a bunch of girls in the village turn 16, they're sent to survive out in the forest wilderness for a year, because it's believed that they possess this kind of magic, and being in the wilderness rids them of that magic, so when they return they are good and ready for marriage. And our main character Tyranny is a character that doesn't want to get married. She doesn't want that in life. She wants to work. She doesn't want to go off and be married and bear children and all of that that's kind of expected of her in that village. So Tyranny is a fantastic character to read from. I absolutely loved her. So basically this whole book is watching the girls in the Gracia, Tyranny and the other girls surviving, and it's really interesting what happens to these girls once they go into the wilderness and what they become. And our main character says it really well, that these girls don't have a lot of power. This is a very backward society where it's very patriarchal. The men are the leaders, the men are in control, and the women are there to have children, and that's it. And another thing about the Gracia that I forgot to tell you is that no one's allowed to talk about it. So no one really knows what happens in the Gracia, and a lot of women carry physical scars from what happened, and you can tell that it's not a nice time, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. And this whole book is kind of like a story about control and how they control the women in this village. And like, sorry, I was sidetracked. Like I was saying before, Tyranny said it well when she says what happens to these girls when they go to the wilderness. It kind of goes a little crazy. And she says it well, that the young girls start to act like they do because they've never had power before. And this is the first time in their lives that they've had freedom away from the male gaze and the male control. Even though the whole kind of event of the Gracia is still male controlled, even though there's not very many males there, it's still a literal way to control them. And Tyranny says that these girls act the way they do because they've never had power before, and this is their first time experiencing freedom of expression and power. And what this does to the girls is so interesting. What I like about Tyranny is her strength. She's such a strong character, like mentally and physically, and she's strong, she's knowledgeable, she's capable, but at the same time she has those great characteristics of empathy. And I just like that this female character can have both physical and mental strength, but as well have great empathy. So I just really like a character that has both. She can be a strong female character but still have that great empathy, which I love, and she's so understanding despite the crap that she gets put through in the Gracia. She's just so aware of that it's all male dominated control. So it's super interesting. I loved the storyline. I loved that Tyranny as a main character. She was my fave. I loved her, and I loved that when I went, without spoiling, when I went into this book, I was like, okay, I know that this is what's happening. I know I don't believe in all of this, some of the stuff that was going on. I know that this is just, you know, some trick of male control in this village. But once you follow the girls into the Gracia, it starts to mess with your head as the reader as well. You start to question stuff that you didn't think was true, and you're kind of the girls' experience and the craziness in the wilderness is starting to affect you as a reader and make you question your thoughts, which I love. So it like super messed with my head too as I was reading it. Okay, I'm gonna shut up before like I describe this whole plot of this book to you, but it's a fantastic feminist story, super interesting explorations of gender roles and you know, patriarchal societies and traditional gender roles of male being in control and female just being there to have a baby. So this book was absolutely fantastic, but at the same time heartbreaking, but at the same time hopeful. It was really sad but hopeful and beautiful, and this book was absolutely fantastic. This is definitely in the run to being one of my favorites of the year. Next up, I read a picture book. I read Maybe. This is by Kobe Yamadana and illustrated by Gabriella Baroche. This basically quickly is just a picture book about this potential that you have, that everyone possesses. I feel like I want to start a picture book collection. I don't have a child, but I want a picture book collection because they're just, picture books are gorgeous, absolutely stunning. The illustrations in this are so like unique and beautiful. I really love the art style. It's something very different to what I've seen in a kids picture book. I feel like the colours are very different, and yeah, it makes it stand out. But yeah, I don't have much else to say about this book because it was a 40-page picture book, but illustrations were gorgeous and the message was beautiful. We come to my first not so good read of the year, and that is Thunderhead by Neil Shusterman. This is the sequel to Scythe. This is the second book in the Arc of Scythe trilogy. Basically, super quickly plot in Scythe. we're in the future where there's no death, no illness, so there's only these people called scythes that are there to control the population. They choose who they kill, just to ensure that overpopulation doesn't occur, because obviously overpopulation is a cause of a lot of societal issues. So you follow like 2 apprentice scythes in the first book as they're training to become scythes, and Thunderhead is obviously the sequel to that, so I can't tell you the plot because spoilers. I didn't enjoy this book, especially in comparison to Skype, because Skype was a 5-star read for me. I thought that was fantastic and a great dystopian. This one I didn't enjoy. I didn't think there was very much plot. I thought it was really boring. I thought the big twist halfway through was unnecessary, and the storyline could have, it just kind of undoes some of what happens in the first book, I feel like. And it's so hard to say without spoiling. Without spoiling, the storyline of this book could have continued on without this big twist happening. Like, the story was already in motion. This didn't need to happen. It felt really unnecessary and weird, and this major plot line was not explained, like the logic of how it happened, or I guess the science of how it happened. I felt like our new character's perspective was really boring, didn't add anything to the story. The main characters we followed from the previous book, their plot lines were super boring and uninteresting. And yeah, this was a real letdown. I don't have much to say about this book that I enjoyed. The one thing I enjoyed is there's this kind of, I guess you call it an AI that kind of runs the world. There's no government anymore. It's just kind of this AI that makes everything function, and you get that AI's perspectives, which are really interesting. And that was the only thing about this book that I enjoyed. It was slow paced, really boring, a letdown. Some of my favourite characters from the first book were super boring, and I just don't feel like they were, their storylines weren't good enough for them, and I was bored reading this book. So yeah, it's really, really disappointing. My first disappointing read of the month. I can't even remember what I rated this. I think I rated this 3 stars. I was really unsure what I wanted to rate it, because in comparison to Skype it was a 1-star, but I don't think this is a 1-star book. I think I rated it 3 stars, yeah. I rated this book 3 stars. What an absolute letdown. Next up, I read The Crown of Gilded Bones by Jennifer L. Armentrout. So, if you guys saw my TBR video, I said I was up to A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. I've already read that book. I meant to say Crown of Gilded Bones. This is the 3rd book in the Blood and Ash series, the kind of fantasy series, fantasy smart, let's just say it's that. I really enjoyed this book. My one kind of issue with it was one of our main character, Poppy's inner dialogue was very, very repetitive, and I noticed very similar sentences, and she was having very repetitive thoughts about her partner and how her partner... I said this in my blog, but I love the relationship in this book. I think is an example of a very healthy relationship. The emotional communication, especially between the female and the male, is great. I think it's healthy. I think it's a good example of quite an equal relationship in a fantasy book, which, you know, there can be some problems with fantasy couples sometimes. But yeah, her inner dialogue was just really repetitive, and it was starting to get to me a little bit, starting to annoy me. But then there was a massive, like, really fantasy, like, twist at the end, and such a fantastic ending. Like, I was like, I'm starting to maybe not enjoy this book, and then the ending was like, yes, I'm loving this series again. The ending has made me want to pick up the next book, like, straight away. A fantastic way to end a book, has me super intrigued again. And yeah, this is a fun adult book, but the couple are the horniest couple I've ever read from. Do they need some help? Are they okay? Oh my god, I feel like they're having sex like every 10 pages. Like, I'm not complaining, but my god. Yeah, this is a fun adult book, and some really interesting fantasy storylines as well. That ending was fantastic. I rated Crown of Gilded Bones 4 stars. On to my second disappointing read of the month, Touch of Power by Maria B. Snyder. This is a book about our character Avery. Avery's a healer. She kind of, when she heals, she touches someone and like assumes the wounds onto herself. And in this world there was this plague that wiped out like so many people. and the healers are accused of spreading this plague. So healers are hunted and killed. Avery is basically living her life on the run, trying to survive, and she's really tired of being on the run, and then she's abducted by these bandits who want to use her power to heal this plague-stricken prince. So it's basically about the journey to get to him, to heal him. This was super disappointing. I thought the world building would have been better, and the blurb makes it sound really interesting, like this super dangerous world where there's not a lot of, you know, structure, and a lot of the leadership has been knocked out by the plague, and I thought this world would be really dangerous, and that they would have to face a lot of challenges. But the challenges that they did face were like so easy. Like, it made it seem like, you know, there was these bad people after them the whole time, and they were just racing to keep ahead of them. And then when they did catch up to them, spoiler, they just like kind of walked away, like, alright. Like, every time they were caught or captured, she would literally like walk away from it. Obviously they didn't want to kill her because everyone could use her for her power, but her crew, they all just seemed to walk away like unaffected every time they were captured or like caught up by all these people with dangerous powers and strong people. And yeah, for a really dangerous world, they didn't seem to face many dangers, and when they did, they just walked away from it. Everything was so easy and simple. Like, it didn't make you feel tense or nervous for them, because you're like, they're just going to walk away from this unharmed. So that was really weird. And one of the bad guys had this really creepy ability. This is a spoiler, but please don't read this book. Oh, it's kind of a spoiler. He had this, okay, I won't say it. He had this ability that was really, really creepy and kind of gave me like assaulty vibes, and those interactions were really, really uncomfortable to read, and her thoughts and his thoughts during those interactions were very uncomfortable to read and made me so uncomfortable. I was like, this is creepy, like, this is assault, this is creepy as hell. So that made me really uncomfortable and made me hate the book even more. I cannot believe I finished this book. The only reason I didn't DNF it was because it was for the Magical Readathon, and I didn't have time to read another book for it. So I pushed through. It was torturous. I rated this book like 2 stars. It was atrocious. It was boring. It was cringy as well. I forgot to say that before. The romance was cringy, and like, I did not connect with those characters at all. I hated every single character. They're all annoying. This was cringy as hell. Yeah, it was disappointing, and I cannot believe I managed to get through this book. It's a miracle that I managed to finish it. The final book I read this month was The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. How have I not read this book sooner? This is beautiful. Oh my gosh. So this is a book set in Russia, based around Russian folklore, and we follow this Russian family, and they have a servant who loves to tell them of stories of magic, and these stories are really frowned upon by the church. And for the youngest daughter, Vasya, she knows that these are more than stories. She knows and sees the spirits that are kind of like, not spirits, how do they describe them? Yeah, house spirits that are kind of guarding their home, and she can sense a growing darkness in the woods. This book, like, the plot does not begin to describe all of the amazing things that are explored in this book. This book is absolutely beautiful. Like, the writing is absolutely stunning. I did like an audiobook and reading, like physical reading combination, and I thoroughly enjoyed reading it that way. The writing was just sensational. Like, this is one of those books where the plot at the start is very slow moving, but the writing is so beautiful that you just don't care. And it's just so, like, yeah, so atmospheric, and you really feel like you're in Russia, in this village. It's so descriptive and gorgeous and stunning, and some of the sibling dynamics were beautiful, and I loved that. But this book was so much more. It was really as well an exploration of gender and gender roles within this very traditional, like, Russian family, because our main character is kind of described as wild and doesn't act like a typical little girl, if you know what I mean. Yeah, so this writing was like, this book, sorry, was just beautiful, and I loved Vasya as our main character, and her kind of watching her grow up, and watching her yeah, learn about all the spirits in her home and that aspect. But then there was also another great aspect of the balance of magic and religion. Yeah, so the kind of balance of religion and magic is a really big theme in this book, and like done so well and super interestingly, especially in the Russian context and in the kind of place that it's in this really kind of small village as well. Yeah, I loved this book. I don't know what to say. I loved it so much. It was so good. I was absolutely fascinated by this book. The ending was absolutely gorgeous but sad, and I literally went to the bookshop as soon as I could and I was like, give me the sequel like right now, and they don't have it yet, which is super sad because I want to read the sequel like as soon as possible. So this book was absolutely beautiful. The explorations of gender and religion were like so well done, so interesting. This book was so atmospheric. I think I just said that. The writing was stunning. I loved the setting. I loved the characters, the sibling relationships. I loved our main character Vasya, and her empathy and her personality was so interesting. I rated this book 5 stars. I would rate it 1,000,000 stars if I could. I think everyone needs to read this book. It is absolutely beautiful. There we have it. All of the books that I read in the month of April. April was a fantastic reading month for me. I loved every single book but 2. So out of the 8 that I read, I think that that's a pretty good ratio. Thank you so much for watching this wrap up. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know how you went in the month of April. How many books did you read? What was the standout read? As always, all of my social media links are in the description below. Subscribe so you don't miss out when I post a new video, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!